All right, we'll go ahead and get started now. Thanks all so much for joining this webinar. Today we're going to be exploring how you can unlock the full potential of your NetSuite with the QSuite integration tools by going over some of our product insights. We'll spend the next 45 minutes or so going through 3 of our main products, and then from there, we are going to jump into some questions. So just a couple of housekeeping items. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat box and we will make time for them at the very end. All right, so here's what we'll cover. We'll start off with a little bit about QBuild, so who we are as a company, how we got to where we are today. And then that will be followed by CADLink, ECx Manager, and NestLink product insights, so the 3 products that make up our QSuite integration. Finally, as I mentioned, we will have some time for questions, so any questions that you've got, please drop them in the chat box in the questions tab, and we will be able to address them at the very end. So a little bit about myself. My name is Sally D'Angelo. I'm going to be the presenter here today. I am a NetSuite partner manager. I focus on our NetSuite partnership. I'm also a solution consultant here at QBuild. So my background is in mechanical engineering. I worked in the manufacturing industry, particularly the commercial lighting industry, for several years prior to my time here in software. And so my educational background as well as my professional career has really given me a great foundation for having these conversations around engineering to ERP integrations. A brief overview of who we are as a company. So QBuild has been in the industry of engineering integration for over 20 years. We started off as a very simple link to a database back in 2002, and now we've expanded our expertise to various different systems. And particularly with NetSuite, we've been SDN partners since 2016, actually coming up on the 9-year mark rather than 8 here. We have over 2,000 customers globally and over 50 CAD, PDM, PLM, and nesting integrations. CADLink, ECx Manager, and NestLink are all product offerings on the Suite app marketplace, and they're certified under the Built for NetSuite certification program, really making sure that all of our products are compatible with the biannual NetSuite version release proactively. Anytime there is an update, we ensure that all of the features are included out of the blocks within our solutions. In terms of our global reach, we are headquartered in Toronto, Canada, but we have a few people based out of the US. We also have an office in Germany, and we have an office in Japan. And really this ensures that we can accommodate customers all around the globe in different time zones and able to communicate effectively in diverse languages. As I mentioned, we have over 50 CAD, PDM, PLM, and nesting integrations and partners that we've built over the past 20 years or so. And we're always looking to certify more of these systems. But what you can see on the screen here is a list of some of those popular systems like SolidWorks and Inventor, Siemens and PTC, a few nesting softwares like SigmaNest and ProNest, just to name a few. But of course, our expertise does stem beyond just what's shown on the screen here today. At a very high level bird's eye view of our product offerings, you'll notice that all of these systems tend to rely or revolve around an ERP system. So that is the primary focal point. In this case, NetSuite's going to be that sweet spot, and it's going to be the area that we're connecting to for all of our products. So our goal as a company is to bridge the gap between any engineering software and NetSuite to eliminate any data islands and really just ensure that the several departments across your organization are all in direct communication with each other. And we'll talk about a few of these products in the coming slides. So again, the focus here is going to be on CADLink, ECx Manager, and NestLink. But if you're interested in any of these other products, please don't hesitate to reach out after today's webinar. So let's get started. We'll start off with CADLink, which is our CAD to NetSuite integration tool to bridge the gap between items, bills of materials revisions, and routings from a 3D design all the way over to NetSuite. So bills of materials don't only live in the CAD model, and they often expand to PDM and PLM systems as well. So just a little bit of terminology to go over before we jump into the CADLink functionality. CAD is computer-aided design. It's a software that's used to create, analyze, and change 2D and 3D designs and models. PDM is more of a data management tool, so a system that is designed to manage the data that's driven by CAD and all of the engineering processes in one central location. And then PLM stands for Product Lifecycle Management. It's essentially an information management system that integrates data as well as processes and business systems all in an extended enterprise location. So as far as our product offerings, you may have heard the term PLM Sync before, and it is similar to CADLink, but catered towards PDM and PLM systems instead of a CAD system. So very similar functionality, more of a different branding change. And PLM Sync is, of course, launched from that PDM or PLM system and reads the PDM PLM data instead of the CAD data. And as such, PLM Sync can sometimes be more of a release process rather than a bidirectional integration if that PDM or PLM system is the source of truth. But with that being said, the functionality that I'll cover today and the actual interface of CADLink is applicable to PLM Sync and is going to be the same look and feel there as well. So let's start off with a very quick poll. Let me get it going here. So the first poll here is, which engineering system do you currently use? Are you using a CAD system, a PDM system, a PLM system, or none of the above? You can also select a few different ones if you're using both a CAD and a PDM, for example. All right, just waiting on a few more people. Okay, let's go ahead and close that one out. We will proceed with a second poll. So with those, current CAD, PDM, or PLM systems that you're using, how do you transfer that item and BOM data into NetSuite from there? Nice to see there's some current CADLink and PLM Sync users in here. Thanks for joining. All right, 30 more seconds and then we'll move on. All right, let's go ahead and close out of it. So that brings us to CADLink, which is our CAD or PDM PLM to NetSuite integration tool. It is bidirectional and allows you to create and update both items, as well as bill of materials revisions, and manufacturing routing records in NetSuite directly from that engineering design. So it doesn't matter how it got there, or where it's coming from, rather. It doesn't matter if it's coming from a CAD system, a PDM, or PLM system. The means of which to get it over into NetSuite will be very similar for both CADLink and PLM Sync. But the general flow is you'll start off in your CAD or PDM system. You'll launch CADLink. It'll take you to the user interface, which is shown in the middle there. Through this color-coded grid and visual interface, from there, you're able to commit all the data over into NetSuite by updating those specific NetSuite records. So whether it's creating a brand new item or updating a bill of materials, all of that is going to be done natively in NetSuite, but without having to use those CSV import processes or manual data efforts. So why CADLink? Let's talk about CADLink's functionality and how it's going to help you to seamlessly get those items and BOMs over into NetSuite. So first of all, it will be responsible for eliminating manual data entry by providing you with that direct link between your engineering system of choice, so that CAD, that PDM, that PLM system, and NetSuite. Because it's an add-in directly in your CAD, PDM, or PLM system, as the CADLink user, you don't have to step away from the CAD system. So you're staying in that system that you're familiar with and that you spend a lot of time in, and you don't have to export that data into a CSV file or an Excel file in order to get it into NetSuite through data massaging. So the launch and the trigger of CADLink and PLM Sync are done directly from the CAD, PDM, or PLM system of choice. Next, it offers a visual data comparison. So CADLink is not a data dump tool. Instead, it has a user interface that displays a live comparison between that CAD, PDM, and PLM system and NetSuite. So what you'll see here is that any discrepancies will be highlighted in the color yellow. And upon right-clicking, you'll be able to view the differences and also make informed decisions as to how to synchronize the data moving forward. So the example I've got here is a couple different descriptions. If I wanted to use my CAD description, I can certainly do that and push the data over into NetSuite. But if I wanted to use the NetSuite description to drive back my CAD data, that's where CADLink's bidirectionality will come into play. And that leads us to the next point in line here. So bidirection functionality really ensures that the data is not only being updated in NetSuite, but the CAD data can also be updated if needed without having to go back to that design. So you don't need to have the model opened up again, dig through all the multi-levels to find the specific component that you're looking to update. You're able to view the discrepant data and simply write back to your CAD properties directly from within CADLink. And so all you have to do is have that ERP value as the default or select it on the fly, and that data will get updated over into your CAD system accordingly. Without having to open up that file again, without having to go into NetSuite to make changes, you'll simply remain within the CADLink interface via the add-in from your CAD system, and CADLink will take the responsibility of making all of those updates. Next, if you are using the whip and routing functionality within NetSuite, so you need the ability to handle and manage the manufacturing routings and the operational steps at which a bill of materials will undergo to actually be fabricated or manufactured. You're able to assign those manufacturing routings in NetSuite directly. So this is a module, it's an add-on module if, depending on if that is a requirement for your processes. It may be a process that's done outside of the engineering design team, maybe somebody in manufacturing takes on that role. But if it is the engineering team's responsibility from a CAD standpoint, then CADLink can also be responsible for updating those routing details. So you've got two options here: either add the operations one by one, so simply defining the workflow one at a time, or you can use a template feature which allows you to use any pre-existing NetSuite routings as templates, have those predefined and populated automatically, and that way it speeds up the process of having to enter those manufacturing routing details. A lot of the time, manufacturers also need to add some, non-engineering components. So things that are perhaps consumables, hardware, bolts, nuts, adhesives, or glue, user manuals, or even labor time. So any non-inventory items, those can be linked directly to the bill of materials in NetSuite by adding them to your CADLink BOM. So you're able to search for an item in NetSuite for one of these consumable items and directly add it to the NetSuite BOM within CADLink's grid without having to have those components modeled in your CAD or PDM system. So that way you're turning that bill of materials into a manufacturing BOM, but without having to complete any additional steps on the NetSuite end. We also understand that specific NetSuite fields need to be handled when new items are created inside of the ERP system. So a common example is defining the type of item that needs to be created and which units type to use. So these fields are extended through the CADLink interface with a few drop-down options, and the menus that are pulled in from the drop-downs are actually pulled directly from your configuration of NetSuite. So you don't have to configure these separately. We'll actually use the APIs to pull in all the data that's available to you from your NetSuite environments and specific to your setup. In addition to that, default values will be defined in order to expedite that item creation process. So if you know that most of the time your new items are going to be created with the units type of each, then that default will be applied as shown on the screen here for all of these green rows, and that value will be used when creating that new item. Last but not least is CADLink's validation tool. So because CADLink is a tool that's intended to be used by the CAD users and the designers who are not typically users that spend a ton of time in the ERP system, a data validation tab ensures that all of the NetSuite rules and logic are enforced. So if rules are not followed, such as maybe going over a character limit or leaving some fields that are mandatory blank, CADLink will not only throw specific errors, but the save button will be disabled until these errors are resolved. So this ensures that anything that needs to be followed in NetSuite, if you were to manually create an item or manually update a bill of materials revision, those same rules will apply through the CADLink interface as well. So we have actually got a new feature that's recently been added to our standard version of CADLink. And really it allows you to take control of your data integration by providing you with a field mapping access. So it's designed with the end users in mind and allows you to map any field from your CAD, PDM, or PLM system through CADLink. So any field that's available within one of those engineering systems will be available to map to a NetSuite field. It supports all of the standard NetSuite item fields. So you can think of things like cost category, departments, unit of measure, different descriptions like a sales description versus purchasing description. It also allows you to map to any custom NetSuite field through the field mapping settings. So it doesn't have any coding requirements. It's just simply a mapping exercise where you're able to click on this little plus icon, select the field of choice and map it accordingly, either directly to NetSuite or map to a CAD property. And from there, that field will be enabled in the CADLink grid. So it really just gives you a lot of time back into your day. It allows you to configure CADLink to your needs and really allows you to configure CADLinks in a way that you don't have to rely on our developer resource to do the mappings for you, increase the flexibility and the speed that this is done at a user level. If you are already a CADLink user and this feature is not currently enabled in your environment, please make sure to get in touch with your project manager and ensure that they get it activated for you as well. All right, before recapping the features, I just want to go over a quick screenshot of the main CADLink grid and user interface for those of you that are not familiar. So this is the page that you would land at once you launch CADLink. what's being shown here, first of all, is on the left-hand side, these indentations are a reflection of the bill of materials structure. So your parent-child relationships, your top level, your sub-assemblies, all the children components. In terms of the colors, they each represent a specific scenario. So the green items are new items that need to be created in NetSuite. Don't yet exist in NetSuite. We need to create those item records. So that is what CADLink will do. White items are existing NetSuite item records. Yellow are discrepancies between the CAD field and the NetSuite field on an item level. So a difference in description, a difference in revision. If I've changed a quantity on a bill of materials, that will also appear as yellow. Gray are items that have been removed from the design and need to be removed from the NetSuite bill of materials. So particularly for perhaps a revision update where this bill of material already exists in NetSuite, but I've removed a component and I now need to remove the same component in NetSuite in my bill of materials revision. And lastly, blue. So that is the manual part functionality where I'm adding consumable items, so non-modeled components that need to make their way over into the NetSuite BOM, but without having them displayed or present on the CAD bill of materials. There's also a couple tabs that provide some supplementary data like the routing details as well as the error messages, which we spoke about here today. And just a quick recap of CADLink and its primary benefits. Overall, it's going to help you to reduce the manual data entry effort and improve your accuracy by providing you with a direct link between your CAD, PDM, and PLM system and NetSuite, giving you the ability to seamlessly create or update items, BOMs, and routings directly from your CAD system. The bidirectional capability makes sure that your engineering and NetSuite data are always in sync. Next, we've also got the ability to assign NetSuite specific fields for new parts in order to ensure that the item creation process is completed successfully. And then lastly, discrepancy and error notifications. This ensures that all of the NetSuite rules are being followed via the CADLink tool. So that is CADLink in a nutshell. If you'd like a more in-depth demo or a custom demo of CADLink, please be sure to reach out and we can certainly get that scheduled. But now we'll move on to ECx Manager, which is our engineering change management software. So it is a browser application and it can be a standalone product, but it can also be a layer added to CADLink. So for those of you currently using CADLink that need that extra layer of engineering change management and approval workflows added to that CAD BOM, this is where ECx Manager comes into play. So its purpose is to provide engineering change functionality to several different departments within the organization to ensure that a change is approved and has gone through the appropriate channels prior to it making its way over into NetSuite for production. So CADLink is responsible for updating that bill of materials, but the assumption there is that that BOM has already been approved and vetted, perhaps through an ECO process in PDM, and it's already ready to be committed over into NetSuite. ECx Manager comes into play where there is a need for further approval on that BOM, perhaps through an engineering change notice, before that BOM is actually reflected in NetSuite. So it shifts the focus away from CADLink being responsible for creating or updating a BOM and pushes it down the line to ECx Manager and is only done once that approval process is completed. So let's start, kickstart our third poll here. And the question is, how do you currently handle engineering changes in your processes? So is it no process, any informal methods, PDM, PLM systems, custom integrations? What does that process look like for you today? All right, 10 more seconds and then we will proceed. Perfect. So the points in the overall engineering to NetSuite workflow where ECx Manager comes into play would be right in between the CAD design and the change being committed to NetSuite. So as I mentioned earlier, sort of shifting that process or that time in the process of when that engineering bill of materials update makes its way over into NetSuite. ECx Manager will allow you to add relevant engineering drawings, any email correspondences, or other documentation to support that engineering change approval process. Um, and then making informed decisions regarding the impact of the change is also very important, especially based on the data that's available in NetSuite. So for example, where is this component used? Do I have any open purchase orders or work orders against this item that will change my decision? How much is this change going to cost me? So all of that information is very relevant and it's available in NetSuite, but ECx Manager makes it visible to the user during that ECN process so that you have visibility in all of these areas directly within the ECX Manager interface. Companies that don't have ECX Manager will typically be stuck with physical paper being passed around from desk to desk, or Excel sheets, Word documents, perhaps long threads of emails. So it becomes very hard to track all of this data. You lose track of who it's being sent to, where it is in the workflow. Some of the relevant documentation might get missed if there's different platforms and different means being used to get that approval process going. Once that engineering change is reviewed and approved, where does it go? Is it just thrown in the trash? Does it go into a file cabinet? Is it in a shared folder somewhere on your network drive? It becomes really difficult to track some of that legacy data. And then oftentimes it's difficult to assess the impact of that change in other departments. So going back to those couple examples of do I have any open purchase orders or work orders that will be impacted? You typically have to do a search on your own within your NetSuite system to find that information and to really make those informed decisions. So let's talk about why ECX Manager. What are some of the challenges that we often see with our customers, and how are we solving those challenges? First of all, it's very easy to lose track of where you are in the approval process. With ECX Manager, the answer is that you've got a dashboard, and the dashboard gives you a list of all of the tasks that are currently assigned to you as a user. You'll be able to see where you are in the overall workflow and where the engineering change is at as well from a holistic view. You'll also get email notifications through a direct add in Outlook to ensure that you get your tasks in a timely manner. So really gives you that that one-stop shop of here are all the things that are in your to-do list for today, and a simple click through of tasks in order to address what is on your to-do list. Next, with the BOM details pulled directly from your CAD model if using CADLink, you'll be able to see that accurate bill of material detail. If you're not using CADLink, you can also use ECX Manager as a standalone product, as I mentioned. The difference there is that you'll have to search for that bill of materials name or description from NetSuite via ECX Manager and pull it in the same way that you're seeing here. So it'll be a quick search and drag and drop function rather than that BOM being directly pulled in from CADLink. Documentation and email attachments also provide further visibility on the reason for change, and they help you support that request or that notice. All of these details are tracked directly on that specific engineering change. So whether it's a request, an order, or a notice, all of the documentation follows that specific ECX along with it. Within ECx Manager, you can handle, again, an engineering change request, an order, or a notice or notification. But regardless of where you are in the process, you can link that approval process together so that the user doesn't have to look through a couple different forms to figure out what's going on in the big picture. So you get the complete story. You don't have to piecemeal it or talk to different resources in order to gather all of your information. And it just ensures that the entire process is documented accordingly. With the difficulty to track legacy ECXs, so I don't think I mentioned this yet, but ECX stands for a conglomerate of engineering change request, order, or notice. And so that's the term that we use as an overall view of an engineering change. But essentially here, you're able to see reports and metrics through a dashboard. It's a separate dashboard from that initial user dashboard that a user will view once they log in. This is more of a KPI standpoint. So gives you that holistic view of how your team is doing, what the legacy engineering changes look like. Are they being completed on time? Are they falling behind? How many of them are completed? So a nice overview of some of the data that has already been completed and is saved within ECx Manager, in addition to some nice visual charts as well. And lastly, dispositions are handled by providing the user with insights on relevant NetSuite data through the direct integration. So I would say this is probably one of the most important features of ECx Manager, is that visibility on where is this component used, how much of it do I have on hand or in stock, do I have any open purchase orders or any open work orders that are going to be affected by this specific engineering change. And then lastly, what's the impact of this change? Does it make sense from a cost standpoint to actually move forward, or should we charge our customer more money for this change moving forward? So this way, you can make informed decisions along the way, and all of that data is pulled directly from NetSuite. To recap, the user dashboard is the landing page of ECx Manager, so that's at the very top there. It provides a clear to-do list of all of the tasks currently pending review, so you can categorize them by the type of request, whether it's a request, an order, or a notice. You can also categorize them by where they're at in the workflow. So just created, pending approval by the document control user, waiting for commitment over into NetSuite, so that way you get a sense of where it's at. ECx Manager's direct integration to NetSuite also gives you visibility on insights that may have an impact on the change, such as inventory details, work orders, purchase orders. The email notifications functionality keeps the approval process on track, while the dynamic workflow settings allows individual users or groups of people, such as departments, to be held responsible for their part of the process. And from there, the engineering change can be either approved, rejected, or sent back to the initiator to make relevant adjustments. Only once that bill of materials is completely approved will there be a trigger point to actually update that BOM over into NetSuite. So as a CADLink user, you're no longer going to be the one pushing the BOM over into NetSuite. It will first have to undergo an approval process before it makes its way over as an approved NetSuite bill of materials. All right, so far we've talked about CADLink, the CAD, PDM, PLM to NetSuite integration. We've also talked about ECx Manager, which is our engineering change management system. It can act as a standalone product. It can also act as a secondary step to CADLink to ensure that there is an approval process in place prior to a commitment of a new revision or a bill of materials change. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit to NestLink, which is our synchronization tool between a nesting software and NetSuite. One differentiating factor, different from CADLink and ECx Manager, NestLink is actually a background application, and it's constantly looking for new work orders within NetSuite to send to the nesting software and vice versa. For those of you that may not be familiar, nesting software is the process of arranging and optimizing both 2D or 3D shapes on a flat sheet of material to maximize the utilization and minimize the waste or remnants. Last poll of today. Let's get that going. So how do you currently manage material nesting with NetSuite? If you don't do any nesting, that's okay too. There's an option for that there. Otherwise, there's a couple different options for how you may be handling the process today. Just going to give you 10 more seconds or so. Last chance to put your answers in. All right. So majority of you don't do any nesting software, so I'll sift through this. If you don't want to stick around for the rest of the webinar, that's okay too. We will send a recording of the full webinar, and you'll have my contact information in there as well in case you'd like to reach out or schedule a live demo. But the next piece of it will be about nesting software integration. So the challenges that we often see within metal fabrication companies that spend a lot of time with the cutting operations are, first of all, there's a lot of manual effort to constantly create new parts and work orders in the nesting software itself. Second, there's some manual effort to create material and labor transactions in NetSuite for all of the nested work orders. And third, there's some manual effort to maintain two separate locations for plate or sheet inventory, both ERP and nesting software. So we'll go over a few explicit examples of each of these challenges and what it may mean for you. So first challenge we see often in the industry is, how do I create all of these parts and work orders and demand inside of my nesting software? So my company's won a huge deal. Now Ned the Nester has hundreds of different parts that he has to create inside of his nesting software. And he's got to set these parts up with part information, with things like quantities, due dates, the geometry of those parts. So there's a lot of manual effort that's required to get these parts set up inside the nesting software so that Ned the Nester can actually begin to put these parts together and optimize his laser machine cut. Next, we've got Anna, the analyst, who doesn't seem too happy because she's thinking about, well, how do I update NetSuite to reflect all of these different nesting operations? So now that Ned's nesting software is able to track scrap, it tracks how many parts per plate were cut, what the cutting times are, whether it's just a simple estimate or a real-time cutting value. So Anna now needs to tell NetSuite all of that information, which is really helpful for planning and for tracking the inventory data, but it's too much manual effort. So she's wondering, well, how can I update these work orders in NetSuite so that what's happening on the shop floor related to these cutting operations is reflected well in my NetSuite system as well. And thirdly, how do I keep my inventory in sync between my nesting software and NetSuite inventory? So NetSuite is tracking when I receive new plates, so new item receipts, and Ned's nesting software knows exactly how many offcuts there are and what kind of plates we've consumed for all of the different work orders. But the problem is there's two isolated systems of my sheet inventory, and those systems don't talk. So the inventory levels that I have in NetSuite don't always match up with that data that is available in my nesting software. And so there is a mismatch in data from both ends. So that brings us to NestLink, and essentially NestLink is a bidirectional bridge between a nesting software and your NetSuite work orders. What it's responsible for doing is creating new parts along with their geometry in your nesting software part library based on production and material requirements. It will also be responsible for creating new work orders in your nesting software based on some of those NetSuite production requirements. So you've got new work orders in NetSuite, you need those work order demands or requirements to go over into the nesting software. Once those nesting operations are completed on the shop floor, NestLink will automatically issue component and labor transactions to your NetSuite work order when the nest is complete. And then lastly, the creation of new nesting software sheet library records when those sheets are received in NetSuite will be constantly communicated as well. A quick visual overview of how the data flows from one system to the other. So from NetSuite, we're tracking those newly received sheets, the item receipt information. We're also tracking work order information and component details pertaining to those work orders. All of this data is synchronized with the nesting software by NestLink checking for released work orders every so often. So this little time icon here, it's going to constantly check in the background every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every hour, whatever time duration you set. At the same time, any geometry that's available for those parts can also be imported into the nesting software through locating the DXF files, either on a file repository or shared drive of some sort. Now, once the nest is complete, so all of the information is brought into the nesting software. Now the nest is completed on the shop floor. You've got your laser cutter. It's done its thing, and it needs to send over all of that real-time information back to NetSuite. It will do so by sending over a work order completion with backflush. It's going to update the labor time entries based on actual times. It's also going to update the item quantities, so how many pieces were actually cut versus how many pieces were planned to be cut, as well as the component consumption. So what kind of inventory levels do we need to update in NetSuite based on what was actually consumed? The tool does not have a user interface other than sort of a configuration and settings form. So NestLink relies solely on work orders in NetSuite and in the nesting software. So essentially it's going to be a background application, so not a nice fancy screen to look at because it's constantly looking for things in the background, but it's focused on the data that's available in NetSuite. So in my NetSuite work order, it's going to look for newly released work orders every so often. And the criteria it's focused on is that status, so that release status, as well as the work order operations. So it contains a laser operation, it contains a sheathing operation, whatever operation is responsible for actually passing over to that nesting software and executing the operation on the shop floor. The work order line or subassembly must have open quantities, so there needs to be a requirement to cut a set number of pieces, as well as a promise date. So the promise date as well as priority will help to ensure that those work orders that are being pulled from NetSuite are categorized in the correct format on the nesting software side. Every finished good or semi-finished good part that we're cutting from our nesting software will have its own corresponding component line. And so NestLink will create a single nesting work order per laser operation code in the NetSuite work order. So that ensures that we're not missing anything. There is a one-to-one mapping between the different work orders and different lines within each work order, and all of the data is being passed back and forth accurately. Now, upon the nest being completed in the nesting software, so we're not going to go over the operational steps of how to actually, complete that cut on the shop floor, that is all done by the nesting software. So similar to how you would design something in a CAD system, the nesting software is responsible for the optimization of that cut, placing all the geometries in a specified format, and then proceeding to actually cut the sheet of steel or the sheet of raw material, and then being able to display some of that real-time information. So how much was cut, what the remnants look like, what the labor or machine time look like, all of that is native nesting software capabilities. But NetSuite is going to be able to reflect all of that information through the automatic synchronization by NestLink. So once that nesting software has done its thing, the sheet of steel is fully cut and it's marked as completed in the nesting software, NestLink will then update the NetSuite work order completion form with the details that are brought in by the nesting software. So here are some of the details that we are going to be completing. Backflush is set to true, indicating that the component consumption will also be recorded at this time. The reference number, which is the work order number from the nesting software itself, will be recorded. The start and end operations, especially if laser cutting is not the last operation that is defined in this work order, we need to define where is this sheet of steel going to go afterwards, or this cut steel going to go. Is there a separate work center that we need to send it to afterwards? So that's relevant information as well. The completed quantities, so how much was actually cut, the promise date, priority, projected value. So based on costing that's available in NetSuite for these items, there will be a calculation of what does this cost from a work order standpoint. And then lastly, labor transactions. So this is relevant because typically the nesting software will have actual machine runtimes based on the program's connection to the actual shop floor operation. And so if that is available, that's going to be very handy as opposed to an estimated value. All right, to sum it up, NestLink's capabilities include a bidirectional bridge between NetSuite and the nesting software. Its primary function includes creating new parts in your nesting software library based on the NetSuite work order assemblies and component requirements. It also will create new work orders in the nesting software based on those released NetSuite work orders. A bunch of tongue twisters in the NetSuite NestLink conversation here. Once the work order is created, the nesting software sheet library is also updated when the sheets of metal are received in NetSuite, sheets or plates. And then finally, it will automatically update NetSuite's work orders by creating work order completions with backflush once the nest is complete. So just a quick recap of what we've discussed so far. Lastly, the benefits. So benefits of NestLink include the elimination of the nesting data silos. So with the nesting software constantly in communication with NetSuite via NestLink, the data is always up to date. So you don't have to have a user manually inputting parts and sheet library records in the nesting software, as well as material or labor transactions in NetSuite. This results in more accurate tracking of material consumption and labor, as well as overall less headache and downstream errors. And really just more time for chicken wings or beers or whatever it is that pleases you. Overall, we're looking to improve efficiency and quality of our steel cutting, and in turn, this results in reducing the costs that are associated with the process. So that's NestLink in a nutshell. The demo itself, if you're interested in a live demo, is going to be specific to the nesting software that you use and how we bridge the gap between the NetSuite work orders and that specific nesting software. So feel free to get in touch and we can take a look to see if the nesting software that you currently use is compatible with our tool. So that brings us to the end of our conversation here. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the questions box. More than happy to answer anything that has come up today. As a quick recap of our overall QSuite, CADLink, ECx Manager, and NestLink are all products that aim to reduce the amount of time spent on manual data entry work, really allowing you to achieve more optimal results in NetSuite based on data accuracy and giving you some time back in your day so that you can get back to your design work. You can make sure that your engineering change management process is well defined and documented, and that you're making informed decisions based on real-time data and ensuring that NetSuite is up to date with all of the engineering data that you've got available via your engineering tools. All right. So I've got a question here that's asking about drawing attachments into NetSuite. So it is possible to attach PDF drawings in NetSuite via CADLink automatically. It'll look for a specific PDF in a specific folder from your CAD files. And what it will do is it will attach those PDFs to NetSuite's file cabinet, which is NetSuite's built-in file repository. From there, if there is a need to have that PDF linked back to the item record, we will do so through a hyperlink, and that hyperlink on the item will follow that item along to any transaction that it's put on. So, for example, if you have that item on a work order and you want to quickly view the PDF drawing of that item or of that subassembly, you're able to click on that item and view that hyperlink from there. Another question here is it possible to get a webinar recording? Absolutely. We'll be sending over a recording to all of the attendees and registrants after the call. That way you can review all of this data and reach out if you've got any additional questions. Last question here is, how is the workflow defined in ECx Manager? So the workflow can be defined in a few different ways. It can be defined as just a manual drag and drop by clicking on the specified users or departments. So if you want it to start off with Frank Wright, and then it goes to Elisa Connors, and then from there it goes to product engineering, that is a workflow that you can drag and drop through little icons and connect each little box with an arrow. The better, more streamlined method is to use templates. So if there are workflows that you know you will use frequently in the process, so maybe for any bill of materials change, we're going to always start off with the engineering product management team. It'll get sent over to production. From there, it'll be vetted by purchasing, and then it'll make its way over to QA for final approval. So that is a template that you can predefine and have your users select very easily. And any tasks associated with that specific workflow will also be defined as well, so that it just speeds up that process of defining what the approval process looks like, and you can make modifications to those templates as needed as well. All right, gonna give you one more minute to pop in any questions if you can think of anything, and then we'll take it from there. So I see a question here that says, how and where do the additional components get saved in CAD when added in CADLink? So for something like a manual part or a consumable item that gets added via CADLink, the purpose of it is that it's a non-modeled component. It's not something that's needed on the CAD side. And so we're simply adding that component to NetSuite's bill of materials. It is not being saved on the CAD side because we don't need it there. It's a tedious process to design that item and include it in your bill of materials. We're just simply adding it via CADLink to the NetSuite bill of materials and maintaining it on that bill of materials in NetSuite only. Same goes for operations. So same type of story. The operations are simply added to the NetSuite bill of materials, or the NetSuite item rather. They're not added to the CAD side of things unless you've got properties where you'd like to maintain those operations. Oftentimes it's just a NetSuite specific functionality that most customers use it for. But if there was a need to map it back to CAD, we could, especially on the operations side, but the additional components are not going to be added to your CAD model because CADLink would not know where to place those. So as it stands, ECx Manager does not tie into the ECO module, though it could. It does act as a separate ECO module per se. It's just a browser-based application that has its own workflow and its own file repository. But if there was a need to push those bills of materials over to the ECO module rather than the standard NetSuite BOMs, we could do that. In terms of time tracking, that could simply be a field that we append to the ECN form. So we could certainly account for time tracking on the ECx Manager side. All right, so that's all the questions that we've got. Thank you all so much for joining today. If you liked what you saw here and you'd like to dig into more details with any of our products, please let me know. You can reach out to me at sallydangelo@qbuildsoftware.com. Alternatively, we will be sending you all a link to the recording of today's session. Feel free to share that internally and simply respond back to that email if you've got any questions or would like to chat further. Again, thank you all so much for your time. I hope that this was insightful and looking forward to speaking to some of you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.